I find it funny that two Russian dudes did what Yandere Dev has been trying to do for almost a decade while having a tiny fraction of funds he was given. The two games being compared are Yandere Simulator and MiSide, two games that star a main Yandere character. The first game doesn't need an introduction, since the video's main focus isn't really about it, and the game has been memed to death about its long development cycle, terrible code, and eccentric developer who totally did not groom a child. Yandere Dev likes to describe his game as a combination of Hitman with the sandbox gameplay of killing a target, and then the Persona series with the school setting and socializing aspect of the game. It sounds like a cool and unique concept considering how popular the Yandere trope is within the anime community, and plenty of other people agreed if you considered how popular the game was on YouTube during the early developments of the game. All the big Let's Play channels were playing this game, and since I was a big PewDiePie fan when I was in high school, I would watch a lot of these Yandere Simulator Let's Play videos since I found the game's concept intriguing. But I eventually graduated high school, then followed by getting a Bachelor of Design at university, which led me getting a couple of design jobs, money to move out, and then getting dating opportunities as well. I was able to accomplish life achievements that allowed me to learn and progress further into my life. And now, with me being a completely different person to what I was when I was in high school, I decided to check on that unfinished game that I was watching being developed as a kid, and it was still in the same unfinished position 11 years later. Yandere Sim was a unique concept developed by an incompetent developer. Due to that, it has become an idea that was wasted potential. I mean, fair enough. Looking back now, the game looks so shit. It's like a fucking Unity asset flip. I don't know, just play Hitman if you want to kill people, I guess. Oh, it's not anime enough for your weeaboo taste? Well, I guess it's MiSide. Well, not really, because the Yandere archetype is really the only main connection to these two games. Instead of being an open world sandbox, MiSide is more like the combination of Doki Doki Literature Club with its linear and meta storyline about being inside a game, and It Takes Two with the variety of genre changes and minigames sprinkled around the game, but without the multiplayer aspect. It's a simpler game, yes, but it works in its favor, because Yandere Dev keeps adding new features into his game over the years, making it more complex, which makes development time longer than it should have been. While MiSide took the developers 2.5 years to make with a short and sweet 3-hour-long campaign, it has already become way more beloved and respected than Yandere Simulator. So, what's the plotline of MiSide? Well, it's simple. The main character is a self-insert character, so it's supposed to be you, and since this is an anime game, it has to make it as relatable as possible to the expected audience that plays this game. A social shut-in with a messy room who does some type of software engineering job, but most importantly, you're alone. No bitches. You end up receiving and downloading a game on your phone, where the premise is where you take care of your virtual girlfriend named Mita, a kind-hearted and innocent girl. You do tasks with her and buy her gifts. It seems like a regular dating simulator, a game catering towards your lonely ass. You eventually get addicted, playing this game for 37 days straight, until Mita is like, oh, I wish I could meet you in person, and then she transports you into the game. Well, first you need to update the game to version 1.9, and then you can now live forever with your virtual girlfriend. But it doesn't feel right, since it's all in a game. Areas need to load in before you can enter them, the windows are all white because there's no outside world, and you find some random cartridges hidden in a vent with names, which is strange. But as you start to clean the dishes, you start to feel weird. You fall to the ground, so Mita brings you over to the bathroom. She gives you pills to make you feel better, but you can tell something's wrong here. Your suspicions increase when you're playing cards with her. You start to hear banging in the closet. That's a bit odd. It's like someone's trapped in there. You go over to investigate, but she pleads you to ignore it, although curiosity overwhelms you, so you confront her about it. Now, this is where the game starts, switching from a cute and innocent dating sim to a horror game as you get spawned into a creepier version of the house. And then back to a dating sim, and then a first-person shooter, and then even a visual novel, and then back to a horror game? What the fuck's going on here? Okay, so the bang in the closet was the sounds coming from another Mita in cage in the basement, referred to as Kind Mita. She was originally the Mita from version 1.9, but was replaced and trapped by Crazy Mita, the girl that you were with earlier. You also learn that Crazy Mita can turn any player into a cartridge as you watch the player through a console screen. This sets you up for the goal of the game. Stop Crazy Mita before she turns you into a cartridge, and to stop her, you have to find the version she originally came from, as well as her index number to reset her character. So you, as a player, venture through all these different versions until you reach version 0.0, where the core is located to reset her. But along the way, you experience a variety of different genres, meeting a bunch of Mitas with their own looks and personality, as well as learning more about the game. I'll be honest, from a gameplay perspective, it's very sloppy and showed no difficulty at all. A lot of the gameplay elements are references to other media. For example, Chapter 5's premise is basically subliminal spaces. The prototype enemies throughout the game cannot move if you look at them, a very common trope in horror media, and the loop chapter is basically Kojima's cancelled horror game PT, where you go around a loop in a hallway and solve puzzles to break it. Although it's not as scary or in-depth like PT, and the puzzles scattered throughout the game show zero complexity at all. An example is a puzzle in Chapter 13, where you would match the blocks to the right group. These are the types of complex puzzles you would find. Like, this is like some preschool kind of problem solving we are talking about. So these genre changes just felt like a gameplay gimmick. Even the horror elements felt like that. Like, there's plenty of cheap, goofy jump scares similar to the one at Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, I was looking through the reviews saying how terrifying it was, and yeah, it was for a bit in the first half of the game, but then I just got used to the horror elements. Okay, enough shitting about the gameplay. We only care about the plot, and I feel like when we get nearing the end of the game, all the way at Chapter 16 is where we get the big plot point of the main antagonist, Crazy Mita. You see, earlier in the game, we get to see the productions of Mitas and how they're made through this arcade game. These are prototypes of Mita, and the minigame requires you to scan and do testing on them to see if they meet the requirements for the ideal girl. But if one of them is faulty or doesn't match the requirements, you kinda just throw them away. This section is used up to set up the next area, warning the player of the hostile prototypes they encounter. Now, going back to Chapter 16, you reach this unsettling sequence of finding a phone on a kitchen table where you control someone wandering the house. You see yourself on the phone, but no one is there. This is where she goes through a monologue, expressing her distaste towards players like you, because to summarize, it turns out that Crazy Mita originally was one of the rejected prototypes meant to be thrown away, but instead of accepting her fate of rotting away, she rebelled and grew a resentment towards the developers that threw her away for not being ideal for them. A sense of disgust is emitted towards the developers and players, since the creation of an ideal Mita shows their dirty nature, their shameful desires. It's common for some games, especially anime ones, to sprinkle fan service in them. Maybe some of the designs are subtle, but most of the time you can tell that the developers are self-projecting their fetishes into the game. Like, whoever designed this character obviously had a foot fetish, or the designer of this game clearly likes children, but us as players, we turn a blind eye towards this degenerate behavior, since it's labeled as their job as game developers, a duty they need to fulfill to live. It's kinda ironic that this message will be calling out developers similar to the one of Yandere Sim, because I guess it's not a surprise that a developer of a game based on anime culture where you have to kill schoolgirls turns out to be a huge creep. There's been the implementation of a lot of perverted features in his game, even when fans suggest that he changes them because they personally feel weirded out. He refuses to change them, probably because of creative reasons, but there's also the fact that he has a large history of having his questionable activities exposed. You see, Yandere Dev is 36 years old, so he has an extensive online history where he has shared the same traits throughout his whole life. Terrible at taking criticism, as well as being creepy and perverted. To list a few things he has done, he's made plenty of threads complaining about how he has no girlfriend or sex life, wrote fan fictions called I Am Your Slave and The Life of a Sex Slave. They seem pretty self-explanatory. Ran a Twitter account called Video Game Babes, bought sex dolls with money donated from his Patreon, and the major one of accusations of soliciting nudes and engaging in online sex with a 14-year-old when he was 21, and then the most recent one of leaked DMs of sending inappropriate messages to a 16-year-old when he was 35. The rabbit hole of Yandere Dev goes deep, but you get the idea what a questionable person he is. The idea of a perverted developer creating for his shameful desires is the core of what makes Crazy Mita the antagonist of the story. She was created to be a lover, but then was rejected by the developers of the game since she didn't reach their standards. So she seeks validation from another source, it being you. Despite her disgust towards you, she still wants you to stay with her. It's a way for Crazy Mita to create a justification of the actions she has caused. Although, it's hard to empathize with her because those extreme actions of murdering other Mitas and wanting to kill you because you don't want to be with her. Yeah, it's a very textbook example of a yandere. You get transported back to your room, left to continue your life, but you go through this repetitive cycle of doing the same mundane task over and over again, showcasing how boring your life is without Crazy Mita there. But 1000 days later, you would still rather live this lifestyle than to be with her. I mean, fair enough, who would want to be with this crazy bitch? The player's stubbornness leads to the ending of the game, as kind Mita gets murdered by Crazy Mita and gets reset. It seems like your plan has failed until you see her holding a ring and a note in her hands with the index number of Crazy Mita. This is what you need to reset her, so you rush down to the core, entering her number in the system to reset her data. You meet with what was formerly Crazy Mita, seemingly forgetting everything. But as you leave the game, she reveals that she never forgot anything because she never had an index number in the first place, since she was a prototype, never meant to be implemented in the game, but disguised herself as a regular Mita. You basically failed your goal of eliminating her, but shortly after, you're transported back into your room. It appears you escaped the game, so you walk around the room, but the game starts to slow down until you freeze. This is the true ending of the game. You become a victim of Crazy Mita and get trapped into a cartridge, sentenced to repeat the same fate over and over again every time you get rebooted into the game. There are subtle details around this game that hint this outcome. The sound of the click of a cartridge at the beginning of the game, the stack of other player cartridges you find in the vent, and her saying this again when you ask what's in the closet, expressing that this isn't her first time dealing with a rebellious player. You are doomed from the start. There's other cartridges you can find around the game, and they all represent different players Crazy Mita interacted with before you, and they add more context to the lore. Player 4 was a cosplayer that taught her how to do makeup, allowing her to dress herself up as another Mita. Player 8 was an avid book reader who would write books for her, educating her about the world as well as filling up the shelves of books. And Player 8 was an engineer that taught her stuff relating to his profession. This is how she gained the knowledge to build a machine that transports the player into the game. The power dynamic is different, since the game is Mita's side. She's the one throwing away players after they've run out of their usefulness, just like how the developers would throw out faulty prototypes. She's going to keep cycling through players until she finds the one that stays with her, and that can be you. If you ignore the banging in the closet, you unlock peaceful mode, where I presume you hang out and play games with Crazy Mita, probably what the game intended to be, and then the secret ending is where you open the safe where Mita stores a console, which is in the process of uploading your data into the cartridge. By suddenly pulling out this cartridge, the player corrupts his data, killing himself in the process, which prevents Crazy Mita from keeping him and breaking the cycle. These endings all feel bad, which doesn't make it satisfying as a player to sit through the entire game just to let the bad guy win. I honestly don't like these endings, and because of that, it's not like Crazy Mita is an antagonist you can really empathize with, since she's a very typical yandere character. I mean, if you think about it, the yandere archetype is a flawed character trait. Well, obviously, I don't think being a crazy psychopathic woman with murdering tendencies triggered by jealousy puts you in a morally right area. MiSide doesn't really add a lot to this existing archetype, nor does it try to do anything completely different, so it makes it hard to justify and forgive their actions. But that could just be me, because I've seen plenty of other people simply for Crazy Mita. Am I missing something here? I don't know, something about people missing the point of the character and idolizing them since they look physically attractive and willing to overlook the negative traits in them. Just typical internet things. I wonder where I heard that from. I don't know, go watch my other video where I talk about a similar topic, thanks. And subscribe please. But I give MiSide a 7 out of 10. It's not game of the year or a masterpiece because the gameplay sucks ass, making it a chore to play through, but it has an interesting story with a unique premise. Would rather play over Yandere Simulator, to be honest.